All right. So at the end of part one, I was getting into how after growing up, I entered a marriage where I also gave over my own personal power and to God, to my husband. Um, I was, at the beginning of my marriage, I was an evangelical Baptist. That was the predominant religion of my community. And then before the birth of my first child, I was becoming a Catholic. I was an RCIA. So I share that to, that was just my spiritual path. I was actually pretty much a New Age baby. I went to church at Baptist churches, but, was raised with my mom and I poring over astrology books back in the days when it was just books and trying to find our rising sign, and my grandmother had the book sun signs and love signs, and anyway, things like that. And I knew what my sun, moon, and rising was when I was a young child, so that was no secret to me when I delved into the world later, or the New Age world later on. My dad's a biologist and was raised Christian, and so believes in God, in a creator. But other than that, not sure what all else. And I'm really thankful to both my parents for being honest with me, for not, feeding me a line of bullshit just because they thought that they should. Um, and what I mean by a line of bullshit, I mean is like, really doing the work of spirituality, even if what you come up with is, I don't know. Like, I don't know. That's, I don't know is an honest answer. Forcing people to replicate your beliefs in order to be in your microcosm or be in your social, you know, strata or group or whatever. Um, have a dinner on Easter where your children can come and you can take that Facebook picture. Don't make them all go to your religious thing. Anyway, I don't know. So that's a separate personal thing. It's just because I come from a very rural, not much education, and I'm not saying if you are attached to a religion that you have less education. I don't mean to say that, but um, thinking through your spiritual experience sometimes is all mixed in with everything else. However, that's a slippery slope right there. And I don't mean to judge anyone, because I have known spiritual giants who were uneducated, rural, Baptist. It doesn't really matter in that sense. However, when you have situations like that where a big portion of the population is uneducated, doesn't know much outside of their own little realm, about the world, are very rural and don't travel outside their community, there it tends toward closed-mindedness. It tends toward suppressing the other. I mean, all those low vibrations of humanity can manifest like that. They don't have to, but they can. So, in saying that, I have no idea what my point was, and I've lost my train of thought. So, if you like this kind of talk, you're one of my special people. But I'm gonna get back on board with. I had babies until my fifth child, and I was just kind of like, okay, I'm done. At that point, I was at odds with my husband. I was at odds with the Catholic Church, as far as I don't want to have any more babies. And I had never just been Catholic. I had been like, if I'm Catholic, I am in a relationship with Jesus, with God, with Mary, with the saints, with Saint Raphael, with Saint Therese of Lisieux, all these spirits, because I am a pretty spiritual person by nature. I have a stellium in the 12th house, so that might help me. Like, all my personal planets are in my 12th house. So, that, the otherworldly spiritual stuff has always been a given to me. I'm also a life path 11, which, makes you, intuitive, and, talking with angels is like, you know, totally possible and has happened, I believe, to me. So, not on my command, but just, is a possibility. So, what I'm saying is, this was a big crisis. It was a very big crisis for me uh, to deal with letting down my spiritual giants, but knowing that I had to. Like, I felt clearly, I will die if I don't stop this. My gallbladder was shot, my mental health was failing. I could not have more kids if I wanted to live. And to me, that sounded like a total cop out, because in a way I'm like, what is my life that I shouldn't just give it? That I shouldn't suffer. And so I had to grapple with the fear of suffering. Like, I'm running from what God's will for me would be because of my fear of suffering. And through like my mental health crisis, I came to learn that God was still there. In my brokenness, in my inability to do his will, he was still there, and he still loved me, and he wasn't waiting. And this is all now my feelings about it. This is just kind of my own intuitive spiritual hits, as I felt this presence, I felt this energy. And just that it was good in a way for me to be cracked open like that, to be more humble, to look at humanity and what we go through, what each person goes through, and have my heart connected to someone else's, because I could relate, because I could, and to know that suffering, and to want to alleviate the suffering of another person. So all that stuff had spiritual goodness and spiritual fruit that came from it. And what I'm talking about is basically my downfall. Uh-oh, my low battery, in a lot of ways. So, around that time, and this is a story in and of itself, but I feel like I was spoken to by an angel. And how that happened was, I had just met a friend of my husband's who was a young man, and my husband was looking for someone to set him up on a date with, and he asked me if I would reach out to a cousin of mine and see if we could set them up on a blind date. And what happens next is part 3.